Hello and welcome once again to the business programme here on Kirklees Local TV. Politicians, mass media love big business because big business has the interest stories, doesn't it, in terms of what we got: big investments, new technological improvements, takeovers, mergers. On the other hand as well, we also get the downside in terms of incompetence and corruption and maybe insolvencies. But whilst big business might take all the news headlines, in reality it's small business and micro businesses that are the bedrock of the British economy. So today I've invited on, for me, a leading example of that successful small local business and its owner, which is Paul O'Leary of trueFleet Vehicle Solutions and Vehicle Leasing. So thanks for joining us today, Paul, because I know you're extremely busy at the moment, so it's good to see you.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me, David.
Can you tell me a little bit about trueFleet and what you offer, and a little bit about yourself as well, and how you came to set the business up?
Yeah, trueFleet is a vehicle and leasing brokerage. Effectively, we help businesses and individuals to choose vehicles wisely. I've been in the motor industry for 28 years now, originally with Ford for 22 years. And then 6 years ago, I decided to make the big move to go my own way with my own business. Why I decided to do that was I've spent 22 years with one brand, and that brand may not have been the right vehicle or type for that client at that time, but you're still expected to sell and push that brand. So I always wanted to try and move away and become more independent, to be able to offer any brand, any make and model of vehicle, and really try and tailor it to what the customer needed and was right for them at that time. So 6 years ago, I made the big step to move away. So now we can offer any make and model of vehicle, car or van, lease or buy, and it can be for business or for personal. And we mainly operate in the Yorkshire area, but I do have customers beyond as well.
Okay, so that's a wide portfolio of offerings there, isn't it, in terms of business, private, vans, cars, etc. So from a business perspective, what are the real benefits of what you offer and the leasing options that are there?
For a business, the key thing for leasing, if they are VAT registered, is that there's a VAT benefit. Even if there's private use on a car, then they can claim 50% of the VAT back. So it's shown as an expense in the accounts as opposed to an asset, so it can help with borrowing ratios. But the key single thing, if they're VAT registered, is they can get 50% VAT back. Yeah. Whereas if they buy a car or conventionally finance a car, they can't claim any of the VAT back unless it's for 100% business use. The other thing is it gives them budgetary control. So you can include full maintenance and tyres. So all you do is fuel it and insure it. And then they know exactly what that's going to cost and have full budgetary control of their fleet.
Okay, so there's no worries about residual values and things like that, and disposal of assets. And
there would if you bought it.
Exactly.
So if you buy the vehicle, yeah, as well as budgetary control, you're right. You're also transferring risk. So you transfer the risk of the maintenance, you're transferring the risk of the resale, and it becomes a leasing company's risk. So you're fixing your costs.
I suppose the only thing to watch out for is the high charges potentially at the end when you hand the vehicle back if it's not in good condition.
Yeah, you've got to manage mileage and condition. So there's a pence per mile for excess mileage that you know at the beginning of your contract. You've got to try and set the mileage as best you can. A limited company can amend their contract partway through to make sure they put it back online, either up or down with the mileage, and then condition. So I would always kind of qualify with a company, what's the vehicle being used for? If it's a particular, what we call a dirty trade, plastering, building, etc., then maybe contract hire is not really the right thing to do, and they should look at an alternative source of funding, type of funding.
I suppose the other issue as well is how it affects the balance sheet, isn't it, and cash flow.
Yeah, it takes it off the balance sheet and onto an expense line, so it can help with if they want to borrow money for machinery, property, etc. Exactly. It frees them up to do so. That might change in the future, but at the moment it's still on an expense line.
Yeah, and for businesses that are looking for ratios like return on assets, return on capital involved in invested, and things like that, then that can be a benefit that way, can't it? It's
and also cash flow.
Yeah.
Because you can start a lease with as little as one monthly rental in advance. So if you need a number of vehicles, you can quite quickly gain those vehicles, put them onto a monthly regular payment, and you haven't put out a huge amount of cash to either deposits or purchasing the vehicles.
Okay. So we've had a look at the benefits then, in terms of what's happening with trends and things that businesses need to be aware of as we look into the future.
The biggest thing this year is the emissions and company car taxation. So last year the government announced a big change to company car tax for anybody driving a company vehicle. From this April, anybody who would take a electric vehicle, pure electric vehicle, the benefit in kind is going to be zero. So there's going to be a huge shift towards that. Now, not everybody can actually manage with an electric vehicle with the constraints of charging, etc., and range, but then plug-in hybrid, where you get the kind of benefits of both. So you can plug in to get some electric use, and then with the knowledge that you've got a petrol or diesel engine to continue the rest of your journey.
Yeah.
And it reduces the emissions heavily down, and taxation then, instead of zero, it might be about 5%, but it's still heavily down from where it is today, probably about 16% today, and it will drop to 5%. So there's a big shift for company cars towards electric now.
Okay, so there's a massive incentive there to move to electric.
Yeah.
Reduce emissions. Low emission zones?
This year Leeds will introduce its clean air zone. It should have been January, but it's been put back till July. So this is causing some kind of headaches, worries to customers, not knowing what type of vehicle should they choose and how would it be affected as it moves around the country. Difficulty is each kind of area, each council has been given its own kind of task to monitor the air quality that it has at the moment, and to achieve a certain target, it's got to try and work out what it needs to do to get to that target of emissions. So, for instance, Leeds has decided to do a clean air zone, and it's only going to affect buses, heavy goods vehicles, and private hire. So passenger cars, private cars, and company cars and vans are not affected. However, Nottingham, they've looked at it for a clean air zone, and they've worked out that with some changes to some of their infrastructure and looking at changing some of the buses to pure electric, they don't need to introduce a clean air zone in order to achieve the government targets that have been set. So it's going to vary quite heavily around the country, which is a bit of a headache. You've got York looking at completely banning petrol and diesel from the city centre. Bristol is saying that they're going to ban diesel cars only, and Oxford are looking at car and petrol and diesel ban from the city centre as well.
So this is going to be another complication that comes in when you're route planning, isn't it?
Yeah. And so as a company, if you've got people around the country, you've got to try and work out how to work with that.
Yeah. Okay, something I hadn't really appreciated or thought about, and it's intriguing. And if we just skip quickly onto sort of technology as well, I mean, we're talking there about moving more to electric vehicles.
Yeah.
Reading in the paper today about the infrastructure, the national grid infrastructure can't support the number of electric vehicles that we're talking about in terms of trying to recharge them and things.
Correct.
Are there any other technologies that you think we ought to be sort of thinking about? But I mean, obviously, personally, I'm always interested in hydrogen as an alternative. But is there anything else coming along that people ought to be aware of?
The only other one that will come around, I believe, is hydrogen, just as you've said. But just to go back to electric for a moment, we talked about the company car tax being zero, and everybody's going to want to do that. But is that then usable in the real world?
Exactly.
If a company rep has got to do 40,000 miles a year, that's just not going to work. So pure electric has its limitations at the moment. There's two manufacturers at the moment. There's Hyundai and Toyota, who are investing quite a lot in hydrogen fuel cell. So much so that Hyundai are about to launch a trial with 1,600 trucks in Switzerland.
Okay.
And the idea of that is the reason why it works is Switzerland's got a pence per mile charge for using the road network, and it's geared to CO2 emissions. So normally aspirated vehicles are going to pay a lot more, but if it's zero emission, then obviously it works. So all of a sudden this heavy investment in technology can give a return. So the trial will be 1,600 trucks, and the way they see it is that the heavies and the high mileage vehicle use will drive the infrastructure to be put into place to accommodate it, and that heavy infrastructure for trucks will then start to filter down to the smaller vans and cars. So the government obviously wants us to be new cars and vans from 2040 to no longer be available to sale on petrol and diesel, and by 2030 they want at least 50 to 70% of vehicles to be ultra low emission, and 40% of vans. So we really need things like hydrogen to be able to take the high mileage and the heavy stuff.
I was going to say electric's never really going to work for 30, 40 ton vehicles and things like that covering long distances.
No.
It's not without some incredible technological breakthrough.
So I think hydrogen will bring that in, and that will help to put the infrastructure in, which is not there today, to filter down.
Yeah, and of course you use hydrogen for domestic use as well, which has benefits as well. So final thoughts then. Business activity. How are you finding it locally now that we're into an almost post-Brexit situation?
Yeah, last year was a tough year, and the best way of describing it is it was a stop-start throughout the whole year.
More stops than starts, possibly. Yeah.
Uncertainties. Whenever there was a date like the end of March, end of October, or significant votes, people just wait and see what happens. I've got a mixed kind of opinion at the moment. I'm feeling the increased volume in January. It feels like there's more confidence there. But yeah, I speak to other people in the industry, and then some are not feeling that positiveness. So it's a little bit split at the moment on that. But great start to the year in terms of inquiries.
Excellent.
And interest. I have to see if that continues through.
Yeah, and I think you look around, Airbus are invested in the UK, and one or two other big organisations are. That's bound to filter down to small business, isn't it, at some point if the trend continues?
Yeah, things like HS2 as well. I know that's on hold at the moment. I have clients that are affected by that.
Okay.
So it has affected their business in the last year.
Okay, well, we'll try and keep that on a positive note then. It's good to know that certain things are happening. And like I said, on that positive note, we'll end, and I look forward to seeing you again next time on the business programme here on Kirklees Local TV. Goodbye.